Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, Memorial Day is coming up, and while that is a time to remember the fallen, it's also a time where a lot of people are looking to donate to veterans charities to support people who have served and are still with us. But not all veterans charities are created equal. Talk a little bit about a new initiative to help people get their dollars to where they really need to go to help people.
So the Robert Alexander Mercer Veterans Foundation is coming out with a new initiative called Charities for Vets. And so what their objective is, they've looked at donations to veterans charities for the last couple of years, and they've realized that a lot of these donations are going to organizations that aren't spending as much money as possible on the people that these people are providing their money for. And so when they look back at the 2019 fiscal year, they found that over $1 billion were donated from everyday citizens to veterans charities.
Right.
And based on their new metrics, they're coming out with essentially consumer reports so that people who want to donate to veterans charities can look into these consumer reports and actually figure out which charities are doing the most good. And so they evaluated 78 different charities, and 48 of them actually reached their would not recommend sort of category.
Right.
And so 48 out of 78.
Right.
So
that's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's more than half. And so they found that in this calendar year, roughly 38% of all the more than $1 billion that were donated in this fiscal year, only 38% went to organizations that they would recommend someone actually donate to. And so they're not the first group out there to do this, but in speaking to them, their point in asking why they're different is that when you look at the results from 2019, so much money was going to these organizations that weren't actually doing as much good as possible. Right. So there's clearly a need for what they're offering.
That's always an issue with charities is the money actually getting to people rather than overhead and other things. So we've been talking a lot about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but we've had some developments in other parts of the world really important to the American military. We've had some forces redeployed back in Somalia, a really familiar place for American people. So
earlier this week, President Biden and Secretary Austin came out with a plan to redeploy slightly less than 500 troops back to Somalia. Now the U.S. had troops there, but the Trump administration in the final days withdrew all the forces, and the U.S. had some military personnel there, but they were going on sort of visits. They weren't stationed there. And so now the U.S. will reestablish a base down there, and the big impetus behind this push is Al-Shabaab, which is sort of a terror group that is an offshoot from Al-Qaeda that's based in Africa. And we've seen through U.S. AFRICOM and through intelligence agencies a real concern in the growth that Al-Shabaab has been able to have in the time since the U.S. has pulled out. And so that really has been the genesis behind a renewed push to deploy troops there. And it sort of is a little bit of a dichotomy between President Biden's repeated pushes to end these forever wars.
Right. And so that raises questions about our broader over-the-horizon strategy, because as we draw down troops and try to get out of the Middle East, try to get out of Africa, try to get out of some of these foreign hotspots, trouble spots, we're relying on other intelligence gathering mechanisms and sort of this whole over-the-horizon concept, but there are some questions about how effective that might be.
The Department of Defense Inspector General came out with a report earlier this week digging into the feasibility of the over-the-horizon capabilities, and what the Inspector General found out is pretty much what we all knew already, which is it's a lot more difficult to gather the information necessary for a strike when you don't have forces on the ground collecting that intel. Not only that, but when you have to launch your strikes from another country, and the only country that is a neighbor to Afghanistan that allows the U.S. to do this is Pakistan, it takes much longer for the actual mission to take place.
So there's going to be a lag time. So we're already dealing with potentially less reliable intelligence.
Absolutely.
Then there has to be a lag time before we can act on that intelligence and have any strikes. And of course, there haven't really been any strikes in Afghanistan since we withdrew.
There haven't been. And so we heard earlier this week, and it was laid out in the IG report, that there haven't been strikes. And so it does bring into question the feasibility of this plan, because we're seeing from intel leaders that Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K, which is the Afghanistan affiliate, are actively working to reconstitute.
So even predating the Biden administration, we've had problems with various airstrikes, sometimes errant strikes that we've conducted in foreign countries. And there was another government watchdog report about a 2019 Syrian strike. What were the findings of that?
So it's important to back up because this strike that occurred in March 2019 only became public knowledge when the New York Times reported about it this past November.
Right.
So it happened during the Trump administration and didn't come out until this past November.
Sure.
And so in the New York Times reporting, it came out that there were roughly 70 people that were killed or hurt in this strike. And at the time the New York Times reported this, it had only been confirmed that 16 of the 70 plus people were actually enemy combatants. And at the time, CENTCOM acknowledged that 4 civilians had been killed. This new report was from a DoD investigation. When the New York Times reporting came out, Secretary Austin appointed someone to conduct an investigation into the strike. And so the investigation concluded earlier this week, and the findings were released. And so they found that there were problems in the intelligence, but no one was held personally responsible. There were no one lost their job. No one is facing charges.
Which has been a common theme.
Absolutely. And so the U.S. conducted the strike in Afghanistan at the end of August when they were pulling out. That was obviously a botched strike. It targeted an aid worker, killing him and multiple members of his family. And following an investigation into that strike, there were also no one who was disciplined for that strike either.
So finally, there still is the Russian invasion of Ukraine is underway. And the United States is seeking to step up its commitment to helping to defend Ukraine. And the $40 billion aid package has now hit President Biden's desk.
So, as you mentioned, the $40 billion aid package to Ukraine just passed through the Senate, and President Biden is expected to sign it very quickly. In addition to that, on the same day that this passed the Senate, the State Department announced a new presidential drawdown, the 10th over the past handful of months. And so it's an extra $100 million that had already been allocated by Congress to take from DoD sort of stocks and reserves and provide it to Ukraine. So they've now provided just short of $4 billion in military aid to Ukraine, and that doesn't include any of the $40 billion that he will soon approve.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.